Imagine a man living in a suite at the luxurious Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. He is world famous. He is the man who lit up the Chicago World's Fair. He is the man who built the foundation of the modern electrical grid. But you will almost never see him. He only leaves his room at night. He walks to the park, where he spends hours in total silence, feeding the birds. But he doesn't feed them like a normal person. He speaks to them. He waits for them. And there is one pigeon, a white bird with grey markings, that he claims to love with a passion that transcends anything he has ever felt for a human being. He tells his friends that as long as he has this bird, his life has meaning. And when the bird dies, he claims he saw a blinding light in its eyes, a light that signaled his own end. This is Nikola Tesla. To history, he is the mad scientist of electricity, the man who was robbed of his inventions by greedy capitalists, the tragic hero of the 20th century. But on Deconstructing Minds, we don't look for heroes. We look for the mind behind the myth. What happens to a brain when it is so obsessed with the invisible forces of the universe, with lightning, with radio waves, with magnetism, that it loses the ability to function in the real world? Today, we are performing a psychological autopsy on Nikola Tesla. We are going to deconstruct the man who spent his life obsessed with numbers, terrified of germs, and deeply in love with a bird. Was he the most brilliant mind in history? Or was he a man who walked into the wilderness of his own psyche and simply forgot how to find his way back? To understand the isolation of Nikola Tesla, we have to look at the code he lived by. Most people know he had quirks, but in psychological terms, Tesla was a clinical case of severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. He couldn't touch hair. He couldn't touch a peach. He had to wash his hands every 15 minutes until they were raw and bleeding. He had to calculate the cubic volume of every piece of food he ate before putting it in his mouth. If he walked around a building, he had to walk around it 3 times, or a multiple of 3. Where did this paralyzing need for order come from? It came from a mother wound of a different kind. Tesla's mother, Juka, was a brilliant woman who could invent household tools and memorize long poems, but she was largely illiterate. She lived in a world where her genius had no outlet. Young Nikola adored her, but he also feared her. He was terrified of the idea that his own mind might be as fragile as hers. As a child, he watched her struggle with bouts of deep, paralyzing depression. He learned at a very early age that the world is unsafe. A microscopic germ could kill you. A wrong number could bring bad luck. A moment of disorder could lead to chaos. His OCD wasn't just strangeness. It was a psychological fortress. By controlling his environment, by counting his steps, by sanitizing his world, he was trying to create an island of absolute order in an universe he perceived as inherently chaotic and dangerous. He believed that if he could just calculate the laws of nature perfectly enough, he could finally be safe. But there is a tragic irony here. By trying to achieve absolute control over his surroundings, Tesla effectively imprisoned himself. He was the master of the world's lightning, but he was a slave to the germs on a doorknob. He built a mental cage that kept the chaos of the world out, but it also kept his own humanity trapped inside. He was a man who understood the laws of physics, but he never learned the laws of human comfort. To understand why Tesla ended his life as an isolated ghost in a hotel room, we have to look at the man who haunted his psyche, Thomas Edison. In the 1880s, the battle for the world's power grid was not just a scientific debate, it was a psychological battlefield. Edison was the wizard of Menlo Park, a master of public relations, a businessman who knew how to sell his genius to the masses. He didn't care about the science, he cared about the profit. Tesla, on the other hand, was the high priest of technology. He believed that electricity should be free, a gift to humanity. Psychologically, Edison represented everything Tesla secretly feared about the world. Edison was practical, aggressive, and socially masterful. He thrived on the chaos of human greed. Tesla, with his crippling OCD and social anxiety, felt like a child of the future, trapped in a playground full of greedy predators. When Edison publicly electrocuted animals, including an elephant named Topsy, to prove that Tesla's alternating current was dangerous, he wasn't just attacking a technology. He was attacking Tesla's identity. He was trying to frame Tesla as a dangerous, incompetent threat. The psychological toll on Tesla was immense. He became trapped in a messiah complex. He convinced himself that he was a saint, and that anyone who opposed his inventions was a devil in disguise. His rivalry with Edison wasn't about money, it was about who would define reality. Tesla's inability to compromise was a key symptom of his rigid perfectionism. He saw the world in black and white. You were either with him and his vision of the future, or you were an obstacle to be crushed. He lost his patents, he lost his funding, and he eventually lost his foothold in the industrial world, all because his ego refused to bend. He would rather be an unsuccessful genius in a lonely room than a successful employee of a man he despised. The ultimate manifestation of Tesla's fractured psyche was the Wardenclyffe Tower. With funding from the famous banker J.P. Morgan, Tesla built a massive 187-foot wooden tower on Long Island. He claimed he was going to broadcast free energy and information across the entire globe, wirelessly. He was trying to connect the world, to make himself a god who could pulse power through the very earth. But look at the reality. He was spending millions while his own life was falling apart. He was losing his grip on the industry, his reputation was fading, and he was becoming more and more isolated. Psychologically, Wardenclyffe was the ultimate narcissistic project. He wasn't building a power station. He was building a monument to his own immortality. He wanted to solve the grand problem of existence. He wanted to be the man who made physical distance obsolete. When J.P. Morgan finally realized that Tesla couldn't explain how the tower would make money, he pulled the funding. The tower was dismantled and sold for scrap. This was the final collapse. The destruction of Wardenclyffe was not just a business failure, it was a psychological death. Tesla had bet his entire sense of self-worth on the idea that he would be the one to save humanity. When the tower fell, the God complex inside him shattered. He couldn't go back to being a normal scientist. He couldn't go back to being a human being. He retreated into the Waldorf Astoria, and that's when the real Nikola Tesla, the lonely, germ-fearing, pigeon-loving eccentric, took over completely. He stopped trying to talk to humans and started talking to the sky. By the 1930s, the man who had lit up the world had retreated into a profound, chilling silence. He lived in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel. He was poor, his inventions were being forgotten, and the industrial giants had crushed his dreams of free energy. He had become a ghost in his own time. And it was here, in the sterile silence of his hotel room, that he found his final, deepest connection. Tesla became obsessed with pigeons. He would spend hours every day in the park, surrounded by them. But there was one bird in particular, a white pigeon with light grey markings on its wings, that became the centre of his universe. He didn't just feed it. He claimed he was in love with it. He wrote, "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman, and she loved me. As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." Psychologically, this is a profound case of social atrophy. After a lifetime of failed relationships, failed marriages he never had, failed friendships with men like Edison, and the crushing betrayal of his business partners, Tesla had simply stopped trying to be human. Humans are messy. They lie, they steal patents, and they demand compromises. A bird demands nothing but a few crumbs. But there is a darker psychological layer here. Tesla was projecting his own desire for purity onto the bird. He believed the pigeon was an angelic being that possessed a light no human could understand. He wasn't just talking to a bird. He was performing an act of total withdrawal from the human species. He had decided that humanity was a failed experiment, and he had found solace in a creature that lived entirely in the present moment, free from the crushing neurosis of the modern world. When the bird died, Tesla claimed he saw a blinding, supernatural light escape from its eyes. It was his final, desperate hallucination, a proof to himself that there was something beyond the cold, hard physics he had studied his whole life. Nikola Tesla died alone in his hotel room in January 1943. He was 86 years old. When they found him, the room was filled with mountains of papers, thousands of notes on death rays, planetary communication, and impossible machines. He died, as he lived, surrounded by the ghosts of his own thoughts. On Deconstructing Minds, our autopsy of Nikola Tesla reveals a truth that is as tragic as it is brilliant. He gave us the modern world, the electricity that powers our lives, the radio waves that connect us, yet he himself was fundamentally disconnected from the human experience. He was a man who understood the laws of nature perfectly, but was completely baffled by the laws of the human heart. He was a victim of his own grandiosity, creating a fortress of OCD and paranoia that eventually became his tomb. We don't deconstruct Tesla to mock his pigeon obsession or his germophobia. We deconstruct him to understand the price of genius. He reminds us that true innovation often comes from people who are too broken to accept the world as it is. He was a man who felt the electricity of the universe because his own nervous system was stripped raw, lacking the protective layers that the rest of us take for granted. He was the patron saint of the impossible. He left us with a challenge to dream bigger, to look deeper, and to never settle for the world as it is. But he also left us a warning. A man who tries to become a god by mastering the forces of nature but forgets to learn how to be a person will eventually find himself sitting alone in a hotel room, waiting for a bird that will never fly back.